Chapter 11. The Bubble. This should be it, Eira said, coming to a stop. Her eyes swept the crumbling towers around them. The layout matches what we've mapped before when we were still on the outskirts. The citadel should be directly ahead. Kai saw nothing but ruins. There were collapsed archways, piles of shattered stone, and empty air. Are you sure? He asked. Well, take out the Kris'thal, Eira instructed. He raised the flat of the crystal dagger to his eyes, peering through it. The world shifted within the blade. And there it was. A dazzling structure materialized where empty space had been. Towering spires stretched upward, and their peaks seemed to lose themselves in the gloom above. And yet, through this seemingly magical blade, he saw it all. Myr'ides was etched along the stone in ways he couldn't even begin to decipher. May I see? He handed her the Kris'thal. She studied the citadel in silence. Her jaw was tightly set. Then she pulled the blade away from her face, eyes still transfixed on it. Eira turned the blade in her hand, studying its edge. Her eyes narrowed. There's something written inside the crystal. Words. What words? I don't know exactly. It has something to do with tearing the pocket. It must be an incantation of some kind. I'm not sure. Kai stared at her. I'm sorry, what? Posma wasvelvus zenfine va kahalveriana, she said slowly, enunciating each syllable. Say it exactly as I did. You want me to just speak an incantation I don't understand? Yeah, Kai. The blade will do the rest. She handed the Kris'thal back to him. But you have to speak them. It won't respond to me, only to you. Kai looked down at the crystal. He swallowed, then lifted his gaze to the space where the citadel stood invisible. He spoke the words. Nothing happened. With conviction, Kai, Eira said. Raise the Kris'thal, like you mean it. Okay. He steadied his breath and raised the dagger. This time, he let the words roll off his tongue with artful purpose. Posma wafelvus zenfine va kahalveriana. The moment the final words leapt from his lips, the Kris'thal ignited with heat and light. Kai thrust it forward, and the air seemed to split apart at the motion. The ruins wavered like reflections in rippling water. Kai and Eira lurched forward a step as though they had been shoved from behind. As they moved, the sound around them collapsed. The eerie wind whispering through the broken spires was gone. All of it folded into silence. The air sat heavy in his lungs, dry and still, like he'd just opened a tomb that hadn't been touched in 1,000 cycles. Kai rubbed his eyes. The citadel surrounded them. They stood in its outer courtyard. His boots made no sound against the pristine gray stone underfoot, unmarred by moss or weather. Surfaces seemed to flow together in impossible, mind-numbing geometry. The twisting spires of the citadel rose perfectly overhead, and the crystal caught light that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once, scattering it in prismatic shifts. Buttresses seemed to support the central building and arced overhead like ribs of a serpent. Carved into the stone were Myr'ides inscriptions, perhaps telling a story he couldn't begin to understand. Kai turned back toward where the ruins should have been. There was nothing. Gray emptiness stretched in every direction outside the courtyard's edge, formless and flat. They were sealed inside something. What? A bubble? A pocket, as Eira had called it, cut away from the rest of the world. He tried to speak. His voice came out muffled, swallowed by the dead air. What is this place? Are we in this pocket dimension you spoke of? Eira scanned the courtyard, one hand resting on her blade. A hidden space, yes. Her gaze settled on the towering entrance ahead, a massive marble portico. Kai followed close behind, ascending the first flight of stairs. He watched the words adorning the pillars on each side of the portico shift and move when he looked at them directly. "We need to get inside the Kris'thal archives," Eira said. "How do we do that?" "Well, the same way you get inside any building, Kai." The corner of her mouth lifted. "You knock." As they crossed the grand entrance, Kai couldn't help but admire the reliefs framing the massive door on the opposite end. They felt larger than life, depicting scenes of breathtaking beauty and miracles. Towering figures with heads raised skyward wielded lances, swords, daggers, tridents. They stood amidst swirling chaos with hands outstretched in gestures of creation and destruction. The artistry was so precise that Kai nearly expected the figures to step out of the stone. At the center of the archway, carved deep into the stone, was a single figure, a Myr'ides, nude save for the serpents coiled around her waist and thighs. Their scaled bodies shielded her modesty. Her arms spread wide in 4 directions, 2 raised overhead and 2 extended at her sides. Each hand seemed to be positioned in gestures of benedictive incantation. In her lower right palm, the Kris'thal rested, its carved blade pointing upward. Light radiated from the figure in etched rays, spilling outward across the relief's surface. Where the light touched barren stone, life erupted. Trees unfurled from cracked earth, their roots spreading like veins into the ground below. And the tall branches reached toward the stars scattered across the archway's upper curve. The figure's hair cascaded down the entrance in flowing waves, framing the doorway itself as though the structure had been born from her. Her eyes were closed, her expression serene, as if she were waiting for someone to pass through, patient, eternal, like a god. The entire relief seemed less like a decoration and more like a record, a memory carved in stone. He looked at the crystal dagger in his hand, comparing it to the shape of the dagger in the relief. This Kris'thal was hers. Eira nodded. Its bearer was the steward of the Kris'thal archives. She must have been... Kai's voice trailed off. He looked back at the figure, the flowing hair, the serpents, the light radiating from her center. She must have been very powerful. The most powerful of the Myr'ides. Her people believed she would end the Brazilian War, save Danetta. She paused, but the darker her magic became, the more malevolence grew in her heart. A realization bloomed and ice settled in Kai's stomach. He turned the Kris'thal over in his hand, watching the light shift beneath its surface. Eira, in which realm did you find this? Kai. Which realm? He asked again. She looked away. Does it really matter? He pointed the dagger at the relief in frustration. Who was this? Who bore this seemingly impossible weapon? She seemed not to listen to him. There's got to be a way to open this door. She moved toward the archway, but Kai caught her arm. No. He lifted the relic between them, demanding, I've been asking you since we left Evergloom, Rune Runner. His voice came out much harder than he intended. Tell me the name of the witch you stole this from. No more deflections. Eira met his gaze. For too long a moment, she said nothing. Then, quietly, she said, The Worm Mother. The words hung in the dead air. Kai's hand went slack. He stared at her, waiting for her to take it back, to laugh, to tell him he'd misunderstood. But her expression didn't change. Kolsheda, he breathed. The name felt like a forbidden word on his tongue. He looked down at the blade in his hand and into the light pulsing within, and suddenly he couldn't hold it steady. You stole this from Kolsheda. How did you even get onto her mountain? Kai's voice climbed. It's said to be guarded. Cursed. Warded. Eira's expression didn't change. I get into a lot of places I'm not supposed to, Kai. It's my specialty. But who would... He struggled to keep his voice steady. Who asked you to steal this? What rune minder would be so daring? I told you, my mother. Her eyes held his. But it belongs in your hands now. You're the one who's going to save us, Kai. The Nightshawl is only the beginning. Then why? Kai looked down at the dagger, then back at the relief. Why do we need the archives? If we have this, if we have the weapon, Kolsheda's weapon, the one she used to make the ninefold fracture, then why do we need to be here? Eira sighed. The Kris'thal hasn't awakened fully. What? It already responds to me. I've explained this. It responds to you. Yeah. It does things that should be impossible. Brought us into this pocket, past barriers that have stood centuries. Eira stepped closer. To shatter the Night Coven's crystal? Kill Velthera? Close the fissure feeding the Nightshawl? She shook her head. For that, it needs its full power, and the archives. This holds the key to unlocking it. So let me get this straight. The weapon that broke the world will be the one to restore it. But to restore it, we need to unlock a power hidden away here? That's the general idea, yeah, she said. Before Kai could answer, the archway rumbled. A glyph emerged from the center of the doorway, carving itself into the air like ink bleeding through parchment. It hung just beyond the door's surface, pulsating faintly, waiting. Then the door spoke.
Fioieme carinire ca Kris'thale hinor ca ikasharnate prenol kashar wazolire.
The voice was deep, resonant, rolling its consonants with a breathy, archaic lilt. The words slid past him without meaning, too old and foreign to understand. He shook his head. I have no idea what it said. Eira stepped closer to the archway, studying the glyph. It's speaking Old Myr, before the Rhine influenced the language. She tilted her head. Even what we call Old Tongue is young compared to this. So, what did it say? I'm not entirely sure. She raised her hand, hesitating. But I think I can ask it to clarify. The runes on her gloves blazed as she touched the glyph's edge. Light spread from the contact point like veins of molten gold, rippling across the door's surface. The stone seemed to drink it in, absorbing the energy. The voice came again, still deep and old, but clearer now.
Poziem, carinis ca Kris'thal hin ca ikasharnat. Prin, kashar wazir.
As if to emphasize the words, the glyph swelled twice, emphatically. Eira glanced at Kai. It wants you to place the Kris'thal in the center of it. Kai looked down at the blade in his hand. And then what? Then the door opens. A literal key, he said. That's right. He would have laughed had his nerves not been on edge. I thought you were being metaphorical. The light from the glyph intensified as he stepped closer, casting a shadow long across the pristine stone. Whatever waited beyond that door had been sealed here for centuries, maybe longer. Sealed with this blade, Kolsheda's blade. His grip tightened around the hilt. Darkness can't hold us forever, he said. Eira went still for a moment, then nodded, repeating, Right, darkness can't hold us. The Kris'thal illuminated bright, and light cascaded across the door like molten metal, pooling around the glyph. It rotated inward, seemingly calling out to the dagger in his hand. Kai moved forward. He barely lifted the blade when it wrenched itself from his grip. The Kris'thal shot through the air and locked into the glyph's center with a resonant plink. As it did so, it sent a shockwave of prismatic light across the portico.
Persilikar, ina, kashar was tiren.
The door responded, echoing into a momentary lapse of silence. The door shuddered, and from somewhere deep within the stone came a single sustained note that climbed steadily upward until it became almost unbearable. The symbols carved into the archway burst into white flame, racing up the citadel's face in branching veins of light. Kai raised an arm against the glare. A column of radiance tore upward through the pocket dimension's barrier, bursting through, driving into the cursed sky of the Nightshawl like a spear thrust through linen. The night curse fractured above them. Kai watched, transfixed, as cracks spread across the eternal darkness, watched shadow peel away in curling strips that dissolved before they could fall. The beam widened, and where it touched the black sky, the blackness simply ceased to exist, and through the widening breach of the Nightshawl he could see them. Stars. Actual stars. Thousands upon thousands, scattered across the exposed night sky in configurations he'd only heard described in children's tales. No twin moons, those were lost or myth or both, but stars enough to make the darkness between them seem almost gentle. Eira had stumbled away from the door, one hand braced against a pillar, her face stark white in the overwhelming brilliance. She stood with her head tilted back in awe. Prismir flooded through the channels in the stone that Kai hadn't noticed before. Brilliant rivers of it cascading from the windows and buttresses, and carved reliefs. Gold light, emerald, sapphire depths, each color singing at a different pitch as it rushed through the ancient conduits toward the courtyard's center. When the first tendril of magic touched his outstretched hand, warmth flooded up his arm and into his chest. Kai managed to get enough breath to speak. Now I understand why the witches fear this place. Eira moved to one of the illuminated walls and laid her palm flat against a stone, watching Prismir flow around her fingers like water. When she spoke, her voice had lost its usual edge. We've brought hope back from the dead. She glanced at him. It's ours to hold. The Kris'thal drifted free from the glyph, rotating slowly as it floated toward Kai. He caught it midair, surprised at how calm it felt now. The frantic pulsing was replaced by a steady, almost contented hum. Behind him, the great doors swung inward without sound, revealing a vestibule that glowed with its own light.
Kagarzanek, Poziem, Zorathis sis Kashar,
the door said. It wants us to get inside. Eira was already moving through the entrance. Quickly now. The pocket is unfolded, so the witches will come. Kai followed her. The moment he crossed the threshold, the air changed into something breezy and warm. Warmer than it should be, as though generated by some vast working machinery. The sanctuary stretched before them in ordered rows of shelves that seemed to extend forever, into scintillating white mist. But these weren't shelves in any traditional sense. Crystalline columns rose from floor to ceiling, each one honeycombed with thousands of geometric cells that contained a faint inner light. Some glowed steady amber, others flickered in rapid sequences of violet and blue. The light moved through them in patterns, flowing along translucent pathways. The columns stood in precise grids, separated by narrow aisles just wide enough for a person to walk through, and the cumulative hum of their operation filled the space with a sound like 1,000 distant voices murmuring in unison. Kai stepped closer to one of the columns. Within each hexagonal cell, he could see something like compressed light, dense and intricate, encoded within layers upon layers of meaning he couldn't quite begin to parse. Some cells were dark and dormant. Others blazed so brightly he had to look away. A voice rose from the architecture itself, resonant and welcoming. Evisarai is Krisen Karat. Kai paused, taking it all in. Whatever he thought they were walking into when they left Evergloom, it wasn't this. They were past reconnaissance and cautious exploration now. Behind them, the doors remained open. The portico and the courtyard were still accessible. They could turn around. He could still choose safety, returning to Korik and admitting all this was beyond him. But the Kris'thal had opened these doors. And whatever truth lay deeper about the weapon and his part in its awakening, he needed to know it. Ignorance wouldn't make carrying it any less dangerous. He was holding the instrument of the apocalypse, standing in the heart of forgotten power, with no clear path except forward.